Marriage is like working in IT. 99% of your time is spent patching up the same old bugs that keep coming back to bite you in the ass. My name is Vince Carter, and after 15 years of debugging other people's problems at DataFlow Solutions, I thought I had my own system running pretty smooth. Turns out my wife Julia had been running a different program entirely. I should have seen the signs earlier. Hell, in my line of work, I'm paid to spot patterns, anomalies, things that don't add up. But when it comes to your own life, you tend to ignore the error messages until the whole damn system crashes. It started small, like most disasters do. Julia began spending more time with her best friend, Greg Turner, a 40-year-old trust fund baby who owned 3 car dealerships and had never worked a real day in his life. Greg was the kind of guy who wore designer polo shirts to barbecues and talked about his investment portfolio while drinking craft beer that cost more than my lunch. Greg's having a rough time with his divorce, Julia would say, checking her phone for the 100th time during dinner. He really needs someone to talk to right now. I'd nod and go back to my meatloaf, thinking that if Greg needed therapy, he could afford the best shrink in the city. But Julia had always been the nurturing type, or so I thought. She worked in marketing at Preston & Associates, one of those glass tower firms downtown where everyone wore suits that cost more than my monthly car payment. Julia fit right in with her blonde hair, sharp business outfits, and that smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. The late nights started in March. Girls' night out, she'd say, kissing my cheek before heading out in a dress that seemed a little too fancy for drinks with Monica and the other wives. She'd come home after midnight, smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "How was Monica?" I'd ask. "Oh, you know Monica. Same old drama with her husband." But when I ran into Monica at the grocery store the next week, she looked confused when I mentioned their girls' night. Girls' night. Julia and I haven't gone out together in months. I've been working double shifts at the hospital. That's when the first error message started flashing in my head. But like an idiot, I ignored it. The gifts started showing up in April. A new purse here, expensive jewelry there. When I asked about them, Julia would wave her hand dismissively. "Greg gave me these. He's so generous. He knows I've been stressed with work." "Julia, that necklace probably cost more than I make in a week." She'd laugh, that tinkling sound that used to make my heart skip but now just sounded hollow. "Don't be silly, Vince. We're just friends. He likes spoiling people." "Friends." "Right, because I always bought $1,000 necklaces for my buddies at work." The phone calls were the worst part. Julia would step outside to take them or lock herself in the bathroom, speaking in hushed tones that carried just enough to let me know she was talking to Greg. Always Greg. One evening in May, I was fixing our router when I overheard her in the kitchen. "No, he doesn't suspect anything. Of course I care about you more. You know you mean everything to me." When she came back into the living room, I was still staring at the blinking modem lights. "Who was that?" I asked. "Greg. He's having another crisis with his ex-wife's lawyer." The lies were getting easier for her, I noticed. Practice makes perfect, as they say. I started paying closer attention after that. Julia would light up whenever Greg texted, which was about every 10 minutes. She'd dress up for their coffee meetings, like she was going to a job interview. She started working out more, buying new clothes, getting her hair done twice as often. "You look great," I told her one morning as she checked herself in the hallway mirror. "Thanks," she said without looking at me. "Greg's taking me to that new French place for lunch. You know, to discuss his situation." His situation, that's what we were calling it now. The breaking point came on a Saturday night in June. I was in my home office trying to fix a client's server issue remotely when I heard Julia's laptop chime with a message. She was in the shower, and the sound was coming from the kitchen table where she'd left it open. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But 15 years of marriage had earned me the right to check if it was something important, right? The message was from Greg. "Can't wait to see you without clothes again tomorrow. Last night was incredible." My blood turned to ice water. I scrolled up through their conversation, and what I saw made my stomach drop through the floor. Months of messages. Photos I definitely didn't want to see. Plans for meetings at his place while I was at work, and worst of all, her responses. "Vince has no idea. He's so clueless. I can get whatever I want from you. It's so easy. He's boring compared to you. All he does is work and watch TV." The shower was still running upstairs. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more messages, each one a knife in my chest. There were discussions about expensive gifts, trips they'd taken together while I thought she was at work conferences, even conversations about how long they could keep this up. But the message that broke something inside me was from just 3 days ago. "Julia. Vince is getting suspicious about all the gifts. He asked about the necklace. Greg. What did you tell him? Julia, that we're just friends. He's so pathetic, he actually believed it. Greg, what if he finds out? Julia, then I'll just leave him for you. You can afford to take care of me better than he ever could anyway. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, listening to the water running upstairs. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of building a life together, of supporting her career, of believing in us, and she thought I was pathetic. The shower stopped. I heard her moving around upstairs, probably getting ready for another girls' night that would end at Greg's place. When she came downstairs in a black dress I'd never seen before, I was still sitting at the kitchen table. You're up late, she said, checking her phone. I'm meeting Monica at Rosario's. Don't wait up. I looked at her, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in months. She was beautiful, I had to give her that. But there was something cold in her eyes now, something calculating that I'd been too blind to see before. Have fun with Monica, I said. She kissed my forehead like I was a child and walked out the door. I listened to her car start and drive away, then I opened her laptop again. There were hundreds of messages. Thousands, maybe. This had been going on for almost a year. While I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for our mortgage, our car payments, our life together, she was living a completely different life with Greg Turner. I made copies of everything, screenshots, saved files, the works. In my line of work, you always keep backups. Then I sat back and started planning what I was going to do about it. The next morning, Julia came home at 7 a.m. looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was a mess, and she was carrying her heels in her hand. Rough night with Monica? I asked from the kitchen table, where I'd been sitting with my coffee since 5. She jumped like I'd shot her. Oh, Vince, you scared me. Yeah, Monica had a lot to drink. I had to take care of her. I nodded and took a sip of my coffee. That's funny, because I called the hospital around midnight to see if you wanted me to pick you up. They said Monica was working the night shift. Julia's face went through about 6 different expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, panic, anger, then finally settling on defiance. I don't know why you're checking up on me, she said, dropping her purse on the counter. Don't you trust me? Should I? The question hung in the air between us like smoke. Julia stared at me, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head, calculating her next move. What's that supposed to mean? I opened her laptop and turned it toward her. The screen showed her message thread with Greg, including a photo she'd sent him at 2 a.m. that definitely wasn't taken at any bar I knew about. Her face went white. Vince, I can explain? Can you? Because I've been reading your explanations all night. Very creative stuff, especially the part where you called me pathetic. She sat down across from me, and for a moment I thought she might actually try to apologize. Instead, she crossed her arms and lifted her chin. So what? You're going through my private messages now? Your private messages? Julia, we're married. I thought we didn't have private messages. Everyone deserves privacy, Vince. Just because we're married doesn't mean you own me. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Own you? I can't even get you to have dinner with me anymore. You're too busy being owned by Greg Turner. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're screwing another man and using his feelings to get expensive gifts while lying to your husband about where you spend your nights. Julia's mask finally slipped. The fake confusion, the defensive anger, it all fell away, and what was left was cold calculation. You want to know what it's like? She said. Fine. Greg appreciates me. He values what I bring to his life. He doesn't take me for granted. I take you for granted. When's the last time you bought me jewelry, Vince? When's the last time you took me somewhere nice? Greg takes me to 5-star restaurants. He buys me things that make me feel special. He listens when I talk. I listen when you talk. The problem is, everything you say to me is a lie. She stood up and started pacing around the kitchen. You don't understand. Greg needs me right now. He's going through a difficult time with his divorce, and I'm the only one who can help him through it. By sleeping with him? By being there for him. By giving him emotional support. What about being there for me? What about giving me emotional support? I'm your husband. Julia stopped pacing and looked at me with something that might have been pity. Vince, you're a good man. You're stable and reliable and safe. But Greg needs me in a way you never have. He depends on me. Because you're manipulating him. You're using his feelings for you to get what you want. That's not manipulation. That's just understanding human nature. I stared at her. This woman I'd been married to for 15 years, who I'd supported through college, through her early career struggles, through her father's death, and her mother's cancer scare. This woman who I'd loved more than my own life was standing in our kitchen talking about manipulating another man like it was a business strategy. Julia, listen to yourself. You're talking about using someone's emotions for your own benefit. How is that not manipulation? She shrugged. Greg gets something out of it too. He gets to feel needed, important. It's not like I'm hurting him. What about me? Are you hurting me? For just a second, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But then it was gone. You'll be fine, Vince. You always are. That's when I knew it was over. Not because of the cheating, not because of the lies, but because of that casual dismissal. Like 15 years of marriage was just an inconvenience she was ready to step over. I want you to stop seeing him, I said. What? Greg, I want you to stop seeing him. End it. Today. Julia laughed. Actually laughed. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You're my wife. You made vows. If you want to save this marriage, you'll cut off contact with Greg Turner today. And if I don't, then we're done. She studied my face for a long moment, probably looking for signs that I was bluffing. I wasn't. Vince, you're being ridiculous. Greg and I are just what? Just friends? Just lovers? Just using each other? Which story are we going with today? Her jaw tightened. Fine. You want me to choose? I choose Greg. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd expected her to fight for us, to at least pretend she wanted to work things out. Instead, she'd picked him without even hesitating. Just like that? Just like that. Greg can give me things you never could. He understands me in ways you never will. And frankly, Vince, I'm tired of pretending otherwise. I nodded slowly. Okay, then. Okay, what? Okay, you can go live with Greg. I hope you'll be very happy together. For the first time since I'd confronted her, Julia looked uncertain. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. If you choose him over me, over our marriage, then go. Be with him. Vince, you're overreacting. I didn't say I wanted a divorce. You didn't have to. You said you choose him, so go choose him. I stood up and walked toward the stairs. I'll be packing some things. You should probably call Greg and let him know he's about to have a roommate. Wait, Vince. That's not... I didn't mean... But I was already heading upstairs. Behind me, I heard her phone start ringing, probably calling Greg to figure out her next move. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I could hear her voice getting higher and more frantic downstairs. Apparently, Greg wasn't as excited about their new living arrangement as she'd expected. 20 minutes later, I came back downstairs with 2 suitcases and my laptop bag. Julia was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone. Greg says he needs more time, she said without looking up. His divorce isn't final yet, and having me move in right now would complicate things legally. Sounds like a problem you two need to work out. Vince, please, can't we go back to how things were? I looked at her sitting there, still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. But that woman was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed at all. No, I said, we can't. And I walked out the door. I found a furnished apartment across town within 3 days. It wasn't much, a 1-bedroom place above a bakery in the old part of the city, but it was mine. No shared bills, no joint accounts, no lies over breakfast. Pete Kowalski, who owned Murphy's Bar down the street from my new place, helped me move my stuff. Pete and I had been friends since high school, back when we both thought we'd conquer the world before we turned 30. Instead, he'd inherited his dad's bar, and I'd ended up debugging computer systems for a living. But Pete was solid, the kind of guy who showed up when you needed him and didn't ask too many questions. So what's the story? He asked as we carried my desk up the narrow stairs. Julia finally drive you crazy with her redecorating projects? Something like that. Pete had met Julia plenty of times over the years, usually at barbecues or birthday parties. He'd always been polite, but I'd caught him rolling his eyes more than once when she'd go off on one of her rants about her coworkers or her mother or whatever was bothering her that week. You want to talk about it? Not really. Fair enough, but if you change your mind, you know where to find me. That first week was strange. I'd wake up in the morning and reach for Julia's side of the bed, only to remember she wasn't there. I'd make coffee for 2 out of habit, then pour the extra cup down the sink. 15 years of shared routines don't disappear overnight. Julia called constantly. Texts, voicemails, emails, all variations on the same theme. She was sorry, she'd made a mistake. Couldn't we work things out? but notably absent from any of her messages was any mention of ending things with Greg. I ignored most of them. The few I answered were short and to the point. Call a lawyer, we're done. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, staying late, taking on extra clients. DataFlow's owner, Bob Martinez, was happy to have me putting in 60-hour weeks again. Whatever's going on at home, he told me one evening as I debugged a particularly nasty server crash, it's doing wonders for your productivity. Thanks, Bob. That's exactly what every man wants to hear about his marriage. He laughed. Sorry. But seriously, Vince, you seem, I don't know, focused, like you've got your edge back. Maybe he was right. For the first time in years, I felt like I was thinking clearly. No more wondering where Julia was, no more pretending not to notice her lies, no more walking on eggshells around her moods. Just me, my work, and a future I could actually control. But the peace didn't last long. On Friday night, I was at Pete's bar, nursing a beer and watching the game, when Monica walked in. She looked around the room nervously before spotting me in the corner booth. Vince, I've been looking for you everywhere. Monica was one of those women who lived for drama. She collected gossip like some people collected stamps, and she had a talent for being in exactly the right place to overhear exactly the wrong conversations. Hey, Monica, what's up? She slid into the booth across from me, glancing around like she was about to share state secrets. We need to talk about Julia and Greg. I really don't. She's been telling everyone you threw her out for no reason. She's playing the victim, saying you're having some kind of midlife crisis. I took a long pull from my beer. Let her say whatever she wants. But that's not all. She and Greg, Vince, they're not being subtle about it anymore. They're all over each other at every social event. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing for who? For everyone. Your friends, your neighbors, people who actually care about you. And the worst part is, she's bragging about it. That got my attention. Bragging about what? Monica leaned forward, lowering her voice. About how easy it was to manipulate Greg. She told Sarah Williams that Greg is completely under her control and that she can get him to do anything she wants. Sarah Williams from the country club? Yes. And Sarah told Jennifer, and Jennifer told me. Julia actually said, and I'm quoting here, Greg is so pathetic. He thinks I'm in love with him. I just have to smile and he'll buy me anything. The beer suddenly tasted like acid. She said that? Word for word. And there's more. She's been telling people that you were holding her back, and that she's finally with someone who appreciates her worth. I set my beer down carefully. My hands were starting to shake, and I didn't want Monica to see it. Why are you telling me this? Monica looked genuinely hurt. Because you're a good guy, Vince, and because Julia is making you look like a fool while she parades around town with her sugar daddy. He's not her sugar daddy. He's her boyfriend. Is he? Because from what I hear, she's still married to you, still living in your house, and still spending Greg's money like it's going out of style. That stopped me cold. She's still in the house? You didn't know? Vince, she never moved out. She told everyone you left her, but she's still living in your house, driving your car, using your credit cards. I pulled out my phone and checked my bank account. Sure enough, there had been charges all week. Restaurants, shopping, gas stations. Julia was living her best life on my dime while telling everyone I was the bad guy. That bitch, I said quietly. Monica nodded. And it gets worse. She's been having Greg over to your house. Your neighbors have seen his car in your driveway multiple times. My vision went red around the edges. She was screwing another man in our bed, in our house, while I was living in a studio apartment above a bakery and paying for the privilege. Monica, I need you to do me a favor. Anything. I need you to keep your ears open. Find out everything you can about what Julia and Greg are doing, where they're going, who they're talking to. Can you do that? Monica's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Are you planning something? I'm planning to stop being the victim in this story, she grinned. It's about time. Julia has had this coming for years. What do you mean? Oh, Vince, you have no idea how many people she's treated like garbage over the years. The way she talks to waiters, the things she said about her friends behind their backs, the way she acts like she's better than everyone else. A lot of people are going to enjoy watching her fall. I finished my beer and stood up. Then let's give them a show. The next 2 weeks were like running a covert operation. Monica turned out to be an incredibly effective spy, probably because she'd been gathering dirt on people for years, just for fun. Now she had a mission, and she threw herself into it with the enthusiasm of a professional intelligence operative. She started showing up at Pete's bar every few days with updates, always delivered in hushed, conspiratorial tones that made me feel like we were planning to overthrow a small government. They had lunch at Romano's on Tuesday, she reported over drinks. Julia ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, then complained loudly that the wine wasn't good enough. Greg looked mortified. How mortified? Mortified enough that he apologized to the waiter and left a $100 tip. Julia called him too generous for his own good, right in front of everyone. I made a mental note. Greg was already getting embarrassed by Julia's behavior. That was useful information. What else? She's been shopping. A lot. I saw her at Nordstrom yesterday with 3 full bags, and when I asked what she was celebrating, she said Greg was investing in her wardrobe. The salesgirl looked like she wanted to throw up. More useful information. Julia was bleeding Greg dry and being obvious about it, but the real intelligence goldmine came from an unexpected source. Greg's ex-wife, Patricia. I ran into Patricia at the grocery store on a Thursday evening. I'd known her peripherally for years. She and Greg had been married for 12 years before their divorce, and she'd always seemed like a decent person who'd gotten tired of being married to an overgrown child. Vince, I heard about you and Julia. I'm sorry. Thanks, Patricia. How are you holding up? She laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. Better than Greg, apparently. Have you met his new girlfriend? Unfortunately, yes. She used to be my wife. Patricia's expression shifted from polite sympathy to something much more interesting. Really? Well, that explains a lot. How so? She looked around the produce section, then leaned closer. Can I buy you a coffee? There are some things you should probably know. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a corner booth at Denny's, and Patricia was giving me the most valuable intelligence briefing of my life. Greg is an idiot, she began, but he's not a bad person, just weak. He needs constant validation, constant attention. It's exhausting. Julia seems happy to provide both. For now. But here's the thing. Greg is broke. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Broke. The car dealerships are failing, he's mortgaged up to his eyeballs, and the divorce settlement cleaned out most of his liquid assets. All those expensive gifts he's buying Julia, he's putting them on credit cards. How do you know all this? Because I'm still listed as a contact on some of his accounts. The credit card companies have been calling me looking for him. He's maxed out at least 4 cards that I know of. This was better than I'd hoped. How maxed out? Last I heard, he was carrying about $80,000 in credit card debt, plus the mortgages on the dealerships, plus what he still owes me from the divorce settlement. Jesus. It gets better. He's been telling Julia he's rich. She has no idea he's basically living on borrowed time. But here's the really good part. He's scared to death she'll find out. How do you know that? Patricia smiled grimly. Because he called me last week, drunk and crying, begging me to take him back. Said he'd made a terrible mistake, that Julia was bleeding him dry, but he didn't know how to get out of it without looking like a failure. I sat back in the booth, processing this information. Greg was broke, Julia didn't know it, and he was too proud and too scared to tell her the truth. Meanwhile, Julia was using him for money he didn't actually have while bragging to everyone about how easy he was to manipulate. Patricia, why are you telling me this? Because Greg is about to destroy both of your lives, and he's too stupid to realize it. And because Julia has been calling me. Calling you? Why? To gloat. She wanted to make sure I knew she'd stolen Greg from me. She actually used those words. Said she could give him things I never could? What did you tell her? Patricia's smile turned predatory. I told her she was welcome to him, but I didn't tell her about the debt. You're going to let her find out the hard way. I was, but now I'm thinking there might be a better way to handle this. I leaned forward. What do you have in mind? Greg is supposed to make his final divorce settlement payment to me next month. $50,000. He doesn't have it, and he's been stalling, hoping something will come through to save him. What happens if he can't pay? I can take him back to court, garnish his wages, put liens on his property, make his life very difficult. But that's a lot of hassle for me, and it might take years to collect. But if someone were to encourage him to be honest with Julia about his financial situation, she might decide he's not worth her time anymore, and a man who's not spending money on expensive girlfriends might be able to pay his debts. I grinned. Patricia, I think we might be able to help each other. I was hoping you'd say that. We spent the next hour planning. Patricia would provide me with documentation of Greg's debts. Nothing illegal, just public records and information she had access to as his ex-wife. I would find a way to make sure Julia discovered the truth about her meal ticket. There's one more thing, Patricia said as we got ready to leave. Greg's been telling people he's going to propose to Julia. Propose? They've been together for like 6 months. Apparently he thinks if he marries her, she'll stick around when the money runs out. He's been shopping for rings. Rings he can't afford. Exactly. He's planning to propose at the Founders' Day charity gala next month. It's going to be very public, very romantic, and very expensive. I thought about Julia's reaction when she found out her rich boyfriend was actually broke, unemployed, and planning to trap her in a marriage to a financial disaster. The mental image was so satisfying, I almost laughed out loud. Patricia, you've been incredibly helpful. Just promise me one thing, Vince. What's that? When this all comes crashing down, make sure I get a front row seat. Deal. As I drove home to my little apartment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Excitement. For the first time since I'd discovered Julia's betrayal, I wasn't just reacting to what she'd done to me. I was planning what I was going to do to her, and it was going to be beautiful. The Founders' Day charity gala was always the social event of the year in our little city. $500 a plate, black tie required, and enough pretentious small talk to choke a horse. Julia had dragged me to it for the past 5 years, and I'd hated every minute of it. This year, I was actually looking forward to it. Monica had done her job perfectly. Through a combination of strategic eavesdropping and carefully placed questions, she'd confirmed that Greg was indeed planning to propose at the gala. He'd bought a ring, on credit, naturally, and had even arranged for the band to play their song during the proposal. He's been practicing his speech, Monica reported during one of our intelligence briefings at Pete's bar. Sarah overheard him in the men's room at the country club, talking to himself in the mirror. What kind of speech? Something about how Julia saved his life and how he wants to spend forever making her happy. It was apparently very sappy. And Julia has no idea? None. She thinks they're just going to the gala for fun. She's been shopping for a new dress all week. That was perfect. Julia loved being the center of attention, and a public proposal at the city's biggest social event would be exactly the kind of grand romantic gesture she'd eat up. Right up until she realized what she was actually signing up for. Patricia had provided me with copies of Greg's financial records, all legally obtained through their divorce proceedings, and therefore completely admissible if anyone asked questions. The numbers were even worse than she'd initially thought. Greg owed money to everyone. Credit card companies, the bank, his business partners, even his own employees. But the real cherry on top was what I'd discovered through my own investigation. Greg had been lying to Julia about more than just his financial situation. He'd been telling her his divorce was final when it wasn't. Patricia had been dragging it out deliberately, waiting for him to pay what he owed her. Legally, Greg was still married, which meant his proposal to Julia wouldn't just be romantic. It would be bigamy. The night of the gala, I put on my best suit and drove to the Grand Ballroom downtown. I'd bought my ticket weeks earlier, telling everyone I was going stag because I needed to get back out there after my separation. A few people had offered to set me up with dates, but I'd declined. I wanted to be completely focused on the evening's entertainment. Julia was already there when I arrived, and she looked stunning. She was wearing a silver dress that probably cost more than my rent, with jewelry I didn't recognize. Greg was beside her in a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, looking nervous and excited. They were holding court near the bar, surrounded by the usual crowd of social climbers and wannabe elites. Julia was in her element, laughing and gesturing with a champagne glass, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. I stayed on the opposite side of the room, nursing a scotch and watching the show. Monica found me after about an hour. "He's getting more nervous," she reported. "He keeps checking his pocket where the ring is, and he's sweating through his shirt." "What about Julia?" "Completely oblivious. She's been bragging to everyone about the vacation Greg's planning to take her on next month. Apparently they're going to Europe for 3 weeks. A 3-week European vacation that Greg couldn't possibly afford. This was going to be even better than I'd hoped. The proposal came right after dinner, during the dancing portion of the evening. The band stopped playing, and Greg walked to the microphone. The room fell silent as he began his speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll indulge me for a moment. Tonight is a very special night for me, because I want to ask a very special woman a very important question." Julia's hand flew to her mouth in surprise. She looked genuinely shocked, which was interesting. Either she was a better actress than I'd given her credit for, or Greg had actually managed to keep this secret. "Julia Carter," Greg continued, his voice shaking slightly, "you came into my life when I needed you most. You've been my best friend, my confidant, my everything. You've stood by me through the darkest period of my life, and you've shown me what real love looks like." The crowd was eating it up. I could see women dabbing at their eyes with napkins, and even some of the men looked touched by the romantic gesture. Greg got down on one knee and pulled out a ring box. "Julia, will you marry me?" The room erupted in applause and cheers. Julia looked stunned for a moment, then broke into a huge smile and nodded enthusiastically. Yes, of course." Greg slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed while the crowd went wild. The band struck up a romantic song, and they began to dance while everyone watched and applauded. It was a perfect moment. Absolutely perfect. Which made what happened next even more beautiful. I waited until the dancing had been going on for about 10 minutes, long enough for everyone to relax and start talking about what a lovely couple they made. Then I walked over to Patricia, who was sitting at a table near the dance floor with a group of her friends. "Patricia," I said loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear, "congratulations on your husband's engagement." The conversation at her table stopped. Patricia looked up at me with perfectly feigned confusion. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" "Your husband, Greg. Congratulations on his engagement to Julia. Although I have to say, I'm a little confused about the legalities." Patricia's friends were staring now, and the conversation was starting to spread to other tables. "Vince, Greg and I are divorced." "Are you? Because according to the court records, your divorce won't be final until he pays the settlement he owes you, which according to these financial documents he can't afford to do." I pulled out the papers Patricia had given me and set them on the table. In fact, it looks like Greg owes money to just about everyone in town. Credit cards, business loans, even his employees. By now, the conversation had spread far enough that people were starting to turn and look. The dancing continued, but I could see heads turning in our direction. Monica, who had been waiting for her cue, stood up at her table across the room. "Wait," she said loudly. "Are you saying Greg Turner is broke?" "Not broke," I corrected, raising my voice so more people could hear. "Deeply in debt. About $200,000 in debt, according to these records." The dancing stopped. The music continued for a few more bars, then trailed off as the band realized no one was paying attention to them anymore. Greg and Julia were standing in the middle of the dance floor looking confused. "And still married," Patricia added helpfully. "Don't forget still married." The room was completely silent now. 500 of the city's most prominent citizens were staring at Greg Turner, who was standing frozen on the dance floor with his new fiancée. Julia looked at Greg, then at me, then at the papers I was holding. "What is he talking about?" Greg's face had gone completely white. "Julia, I can explain." "Explain what? Explain that you're broke? Explain that you're still married." "I'm not still married." "Patricia, tell them." Patricia stood up and addressed the room like she was giving a presentation. "Greg and I are legally separated, but our divorce won't be final until he pays the $50,000 he owes me in the settlement. Since he doesn't have $50,000, we're still married." Julia stared at the ring on her finger like it had turned into a snake. "You propose to me while you're still married to someone else?" "Julia, please let me explain." But Julia was just getting started. "And you're broke. All those gifts, all those dinners, all those promises about Europe. You don't have any money?" "I have money. I'm having some temporary cash flow issues." $200,000 in debt is not a cash flow issue." Julia's voice was getting higher and more shrill. "You lied to me. You've been lying to me about everything." The crowd was watching this like it was better than any movie. I could see people pulling out their phones, probably recording the whole thing for social media. Greg was sweating profusely now. "Julia, I love you. The money doesn't matter. We can work through this together." "Work through this?" "Greg, you can't even work through your own problems. How are we supposed to work through them together?" She yanked the ring off her finger and threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and rolled across the dance floor, coming to rest near the bandstand. "You used me," she continued, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "You made me think you were successful and stable, and all this time you were just a broke loser living on credit cards." "I never used you. I love you." Julia laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Love me? Greg, you can't even afford to love me." And then she turned and stalked out of the ballroom, leaving Greg standing alone on the dance floor in front of 500 people, with his credit card-financed engagement ring rolling around on the floor. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then someone in the back of the room started clapping slowly. Others joined in until the entire room was giving Greg a sarcastic round of applause. He looked around at all the faces staring at him, some amused, some pitying, some openly hostile, and then he ran. Actually ran, pushing through the crowd toward the exit like his hair was on fire. I walked over and picked up the engagement ring. It was actually quite pretty, and it had probably cost him at least $10,000 he didn't have. Patricia appeared beside me. "I believe that belongs to my husband." I handed her the ring. "Your husband's going to need to sell this to make his next payment to you." "Yes, he is." Monica materialized on my other side, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "That was even better than I hoped." "It was pretty satisfying," I agreed. The three of us stood there for a moment, watching the crowd slowly return to their conversations and their dancing. The drama was over. but people would be talking about this for months. "So what now?" Monica asked. I finished my scotch and set the glass on a nearby table. Now I go home to my nice, quiet apartment and get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow I start divorce proceedings. What about Julia? I shrugged. What about her? She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the conversation starting up around me. People were already dissecting what had happened, speculating about what Julia would do next, wondering how Greg was going to pay his debts. But I wasn't wondering about any of that. For the first time in months, I knew exactly where I stood and exactly what I was going to do next. I was going to be free. The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal. By Monday morning, the story had spread through the entire city. Social media was buzzing with videos of Julia's meltdown and Greg's humiliation. The local newspaper even ran a gossip column piece about it, though they were careful not to name names directly. I was at work, enjoying the first peaceful Monday I'd had in months, when my phone started ringing. Julia's name appeared on the screen for the 15th time that morning. I'd been ignoring her calls, but I was starting to think I should answer just to make them stop. "What do you want, Julia?" "Vince, thank God. We need to talk." "No, we don't." "Yes, we do. What you did at the gala, that was cruel and vindictive and completely unnecessary." I leaned back in my office chair and looked out the window at the city below. "What I did? Julia, all I did was tell the truth. Greg is broke and still married. Those are facts, not opinions. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You humiliated yourself. I just provided the context." There was a long pause. When Julia spoke again, her voice had changed from angry to pleading. "Vince, I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But what you did, destroying my relationship like that, it was vindictive. Your relationship was built on lies. I just exposed them. Greg loves me. Greg is a weak, broke man-child who was using you to make himself feel important, and you were using him to get expensive gifts and fancy dinners. It wasn't love, Julia. It was mutual exploitation." Another pause. "I want to come home." And there it was, the real reason for the call. "No. Vince, please. I know we have problems, but we can work through them. We've been together for 15 years. 15 years that you threw away for a man who turned out to be a fraud, just like you." "I'm not a fraud." "Aren't you? You spent months lying to me about where you were, who you were with, what you were doing. You manipulated Greg's feelings to get what you wanted. You bragged to your friends about how easy it was to control him. What would you call that?" Silence. "Julia, I filed for divorce this morning. You'll be served with papers by the end of the week." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. It's over. Find somewhere else to live." "I don't have anywhere else to go. Greg won't return my calls, and I can't afford a place on my own right now." "That sounds like a personal problem." "Vince, I'm your wife." "No, you're not. You stopped being my wife the moment you chose Greg over me. Now you're just a woman I used to be married to who needs to find her own place to live." I hung up before she could respond. The divorce papers were served on Thursday. Julia called me crying, begging me to reconsider, promising she'd changed, swearing she'd never see Greg again. I let it go to voicemail. Friday evening, I was at Pete's bar, celebrating the end of what had been a surprisingly good week, when Monica burst through the door looking like she'd just witnessed a miracle. "You have to hear this," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I just came from the grocery store, and guess who I saw in the parking lot?" I'm afraid to ask. Julia, crying in her car, and not just crying, sobbing, like ugly crying. Why was she at the grocery store? That's the best part. She was returning bottles and cans for the deposit money. I stared at Monica. She was what? Returning bottles and cans. She had garbage bags full of them in her back seat. I watched her go in and come out with like $12 in cash. The mental image of Julia, who used to spend $12 on a single cocktail collecting bottle deposits for grocery money, was almost too perfect to believe. "It gets better," Monica continued. I followed her. "Don't look at me like that. I was curious," and she went to the dollar store. The dollar store, Vince. She bought ramen noodles and generic shampoo. Where is she living? That's what I wanted to find out. So I followed her some more, and she's staying at the Sunset Motel on Route 9. The Sunset Motel was the kind of place that rented rooms by the week and didn't ask too many questions. It was a long way from the luxury lifestyle Julia had been enjoying with Greg's. How did she end up there? Well, apparently Greg really isn't taking her calls. And get this, his dealerships are closing, all 3 of them. He's filing for bankruptcy. What about Julia's job? Monica's grin turned predatory. Gone. Apparently, her boss didn't appreciate the negative publicity from the gala incident. Something about maintaining the company's professional image. So Julia had lost her boyfriend, her job, and her home, all in the span of a week. It should have felt satisfying, but mostly I just felt empty. Monica, why are you telling me all this? Because she's been calling everyone we know, trying to find someone who'll lend her money or let her stay with them. She's desperate, Vince. And she's blaming you for everything? Blaming me? She's telling people you sabotaged her relationship and destroyed her life out of spite. She actually said you were jealous of her happiness. That sparked something in me. Jealous of her happiness. I'd been jealous of her lies, her manipulation, her casual cruelty. Where did you say she was staying? The Sunset Motel, room 237. Why? I finished my beer and stood up, because I think it's time Julia and I had a final conversation. The Sunset Motel was a rundown last stop on Route 9, flickering neon, cracked asphalt, beat-up cars in the lot. I knocked on room 237. Who is it? Vince. The door swung open. Julia stood there in faded sweatpants and a stained tee, eyes red, hair greasy, looking smaller than I remembered. Vince, thank God. I knew you'd come. She reached for a hug. I stepped back. We need to talk. She ushered me in. The room smelled of stale takeout and despair. Unmade bed, scattered clothes, trash overflowing with fast food wrappers. I know it's not much, she said, but it's temporary. Julia, listen carefully. I'm not here to reconcile. I'm not here to help. I'm here to make sure you understand. Her face fell. Understand what? You did this to yourself. Every bit of it. The divorce, losing Greg, losing your job, ending up here. You chose to lie to me for months. You chose to manipulate Greg for money and gifts while bragging about how easy he was to control. You chose him over me when I gave you the ultimatum. This is all on you. She sank onto the bed, tears starting. I know I made mistakes. They weren't mistakes. They were deliberate, cruel. You used both of us. When it fell apart, you blamed everyone but yourself. I loved him. You loved what he gave you, just like you never really loved me. You loved the stability, the security, the safety net while you played your games. She opened her mouth, closed it. When's the last time you did something for me that didn't benefit you? When's the last time you put my needs first? Asked how I felt? Silence. You can't think of anything. I was going through a difficult time. For 15 years? Our entire marriage? She wiped her face. What do you want me to say? I'm sorry. I was wrong. I want you back. I want you to admit why this happened. Acknowledge you're here because of your choices, not because I'm vindictive or cruel. She stared at the floor. Traffic hummed outside. A neighbor's TV blared through the wall. Finally, I understand. I used Greg. I used you. I lied, manipulated, hurt people who cared. Now I'm alone because of it. The first honest words in months. Julia, I hope you become a better person, but you'll have to do it without me. I turned for the door. Vince? What? Do you think I can? Figure out how to be better? I looked back, at the woman I'd loved 20 years ago, now broken on a sagging motel bed. I don't know, but I hope so. I walked out, closing the door behind me. Driving away, the weight lifted. No anger left, just quiet peace. My phone buzzed. Pete, beer's getting warm. Where are you? I smiled, turned toward town, toward friends, toward a life that was finally mine. For the first time in 15 years, I was completely free, and it felt amazing.